Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome to Behind the Business at 3.5. For those of you who I have not had the privilege of meeting, hi, my name is Blake Hanrahan, and I'm a strategic partnerships rep here at 1824, based out of Boston University. And today I am so excited to be joined by the incomparable Kate Haffenden, VP of International Marketing at Capitol Records. Kate started her career in music journalism in the UK, working at Q Magazine and then Kerrang, before moving into publicity at Mercury Def Jam UK. And then she became a tour publicist at Atlantic Records. She made the leap from London to sunnier Californian climates in 2010, holding international marketing positions at Rhino and then Warner Records until 2021, when she moved to Capitol Records as VP of International Marketing, working on campaigns for all of your favorite artists: Katy Perry, Troye Sivan, Lil Baby, Lil Yachty. The list goes on and on. Kate, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hi, Blake. It's so nice to be here. I'm in sunny Santa Monica, in a beautifully coordinated studio that's bright and sunny, and we're fresh off the holiday weekend, so I'm psyched to be here, and thank you so much again for asking me. I'm excited.
Please. The pleasure is all yours, all mine. I mean, all of
Mine
our
too,
pleasure.
Blake.
Chat, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We want to get your questions sent over to Kate. We want to make this a mutual conversation. So feel free to drop them and we will incorporate them into the conversation. Now, Kate, you started your career in journalism before moving into the publicity world. I'm wondering, how did those internships and experiences outside of music help you break into the industry? And what advice would you give to young people in the 18 to 24 demographic looking to break into music?
Yeah. So I trained in journalism. That was what I went to school for, at the London College of Printing, which is now called the London College of Communication, in Elephant and Castle in London. It was where Dazed magazine was started. Little fun fact there. And I had just always, my whole life, that I'd been a devout music fan, ever since I was a child, like a little toddler. And I'd always loved the music press. I'd loved the stories behind how did artists and bands like get to be where they were today, like what did they come from, what were their influences, and then the stories behind the songs. So that had kind of brought me to music journalism. So I did a 3-year course, and as part of that, you had to source internships. I think the model was slightly different back then to what it is now. So I wrote off a bunch of letters to various magazines, but the one that I had really had my eye on was Q Magazine. And I was accepted. So I got an internship there, and I remember kind of thinking that it was going to be this like the music press. It was going to be this crazy place with people doing lines of Coke on the table and like alcohol everywhere. And then when I got there, it was like a lot of people like diligently working on their like Apple Macs. It was quite quiet, and I was like, oh wow, and. Yeah, it was a great internship. It was under this company called EMAP that had Q Magazine, Kerrang Magazine, and Mojo Magazine. So they were all kind of like the leading mags at that time, and I worked really hard there, and got to do different, assignments and little bits and pieces of writing. And then, as part of being in that building, I got invited to work on their events teams. So they did like the music award, like Kerrang Awards, the Q Awards, and then Q Magazine had a presence at Glastonbury festival. So I would go on site and they produced a magazine, which, as I'm saying that, is completely crazy. When you were on site in the mud at Glastonbury Festival, you'd have a team of journalists reviewing, and you would print this newspaper that they gave out at the festival every single day. So it was kind of crazy, but I was lucky enough to, be part of that with them. And Yeah, it was an amazing experience, and I always felt like when you would go into the office, it was like this balance of kind of wanting to be really keen and engaged, like how can I help, but also like not wanting to be annoying. And sometimes it was like you were bored as hell, and but like trying to look busy. But I remember just always smiling, always making sure I was talking to everybody. And yeah, and that job when I worked on the events team, it was kind of a small team, and they gave me a ton of responsibility. And part of that, I mean, Blake and I were talking before, was, I was in charge of ticketing. So I would send out like the award tickets to different artist teams. And as part of that, I got to understand, when I would like, I want to work in music, but then you were kind of like, what does that really mean? There's so many of these different facets, like the labels, there's the agent, there's the promoter, there's the artist manager, there's the publicist. And so like in a funny way, like biking out these tickets really, really exposed me to like the different like pockets of the industry. And then, let's see. But they didn't have a permanent role for me. And so and then I kind of, as I was dealing a lot with the publicity teams at the labels, who had artists that were coming to these events, that's when I decided like I want to do that. However, I was broke as hell. I had no money, so I had taken this job at an office, and meanwhile was like continuously applying for internships at record labels. And that it reminds me of like dating, or like, because you're kind of like, it's been 2 days, is it too soon to follow up, like maybe they're busy, that whole like dance. And then I got offered one. I got accepted for work experience at Mercury Records in the UK, but it meant like leaving this paid job that I had. And I remember the guy that ran it. He was like, "I did an internship at a record label. Like, you'll never end up getting a job there. Like, you're giving up a good thing here." And I was like, "I have to try." And so I left this paid job and by this time I think I was 24, so I was almost like a little like aged for an internship. But like, thank God I did, because I ended up staying in that press department at Mercury Def Jam, and temping there. And then that they just didn't have a job for me. But eventually, like I had like enough experience and enough contacts that I had made to get recommended for this job at Atlantic in the UK. So the internship piece was huge in my career, huge. I felt like, I just always had I applied for so many jobs, and I just had this overwhelming feeling that, nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows me, and it's important. Like, I need to be in the mix, and I just need to be visible to people. And the other thing that I felt was like, if I stay around long enough, someone is going to hire me. And eventually they did, and it led to this job at Atlantic, which was my first kind of official record company job after Def Jam, where I was temping.
Well, what an amazing story. It sounds like every track that you were on ultimately gave you some sort of education or insight into the different roles that people play in the music business, the variety of positions and the ways that there are to actually get into the weeds and get your feet wet. You talked a little bit about Glastonbury and kind of that entire era. And I'm wondering, given that you're such a marketing expert, what was it like working with artists during that ideal kind of MySpace era, like with the packed shows and the online fan communities? Did that influence the way that music was promoted? And do you have a favorite memory from that specific era?
Yeah, definitely. So when I got to Atlantic, a big part of and again, this was when I was at Atlantic UK. So I was a publicity assistant and like looked after tour press. So that's when the bands came over, you would be, plugging all the regional shows. And a big part of the Atlantic roster at that time was the Fueled by Ramen imprint, which John Janik, who now runs Capital Interscope, it was his label. And it would those bands. It was such an exciting time because they really had come like with that wave of MySpace, which like completely revolutionized like the relationship that fans and artists had. Like, you know, even like when I was, you know, 5 years prior, like you weren't DMing with Kurt Cobain, you know what I mean? Like there was like such a removal from like between fan and artist, and I think MySpace really changed that. And you know, especially with those bands, you know, Academy is, Cute is What We Aim For, Gym Class Heroes, like these bands would come over and would have shows to play, and we were always kind of like, you know, it was so early for them, like would anyone be at the shows, like what was this going to be like? And you know, those shows would be absolutely packed, you know, mostly I think from, you know, kids just having seen Pete Wentz's Top 8. Like the Top 8 was like a huge thing on MySpace. And getting turned on to those bands, you know, that way, and like find it, and that MySpace becoming such like a discovery tool outside of like the traditional like record company avenues. So yeah, that felt a very exciting time. All those bands, yeah, a lot of fun.
It was kind of the introduction in a way of like the parasocial, tapping into a relationship with your favorite artist. Do you notice any parallels with the MySpace era, and then also how somebody like you would leverage TikTok today to promote an artist?
Yeah, totally. I think like that, you know, I mean, for better or worse, like that, like expectation now that we have, you know, which I think is that everybody, you know, we expect so much more access, you know, to artists, and we expect to, you know, I think, you know, even just like prior to MySpace, like the funnel of the kind of material that you got from artists was, you know, TV performances, magazine interviews, you know, quite traditional. And then I think after that, and like as we've come forward to now, you know, we're kind of like interested in like, what are you eating for breakfast, or you know, like how did this song come about, like who are you like riding in a car with, you know, there's just, you know, and there's a lot of like fun obviously that artists and well, everybody can have with TikTok and short form content, but you know, like anything, I think that also like comes with its challenges as well, you know.
Of course. Yeah, that's a really thoughtful answer. And yeah, you're right. The landscape's changed so much from those traditional formats, the magazines, then morphing into we want to be so close to the artist. Like that's the way that fans connect. They feel implored to listen to their favorite artist's work if they feel like they really know the person on a friend level. So it's really interesting to hear you speak about kind of how that trajectory ultimately unfolded. And one artist that I was really amazed to see that you have such a history with was working with Jay-Z on the Blueprint 3 campaign, specifically in the UK. I mean, this turned into just such a massive endeavor. Platinum albums, sold out arena tours, you name it, you made it happen. I'm wondering, he's such a quintessential American New York act. Like, how do you take an American act overseas? And does the world that has been built for them in the States translate seamlessly to an international demand? What does kind of the difference look like when bringing an act overseas?
Yeah, thanks for the huge props there, Blake. I definitely feel that I was, you know, single-handedly responsible for Jay-Z's success of the Blueprint 3. You know, nothing to do. But no, I had a small like part in the publicity campaign in the UK. I mean, that just was an incredibly special, you know, where you're like blessed to be here, like moment. I'll never forget that when the music was the first song that we heard from the album that the US label had sent through was Death of Auto Tune, and then Run This Town, and then Empire State of Mind, and you were just, I mean, the music just kind of like spoke for itself. And It was really incredible. I mean, he came, I think, a theme like throughout, and I've worked in the UK, so you have repertoire coming in, that you're developing the UK story. And then my job now is to take the US story and develop that locally and find ways to like plug global artists in a local level. And I think with that, the that Jay-Z campaign, I mean, we did this. It wasn't. I mean, he did an underplay at this venue called the Roundhouse in Camden, which was like 3,000 people. It was like the hottest ticket, and it's 3,000 cap venue. So it was an incredibly special evening, and he did little bits of press for. I think he did a couple of pieces of press for us, and I remember what we were trying to like make the interviews kind of stretch a little long, further and use them for different outlets. And then one journalist, one of the 2 or 3 journalists that had spoken to him, was like, "I'm going to give you all the quotes that I have, because this being able to interview Jay-Z is like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and like I feel blessed that I was able to have that opportunity. So I want you to, use my quotes, and you can take them and use them for other magazines," which, like, by the way, like, never happens. So yeah, that felt very, very special. And I think like just the him being in market, this incredible record, like it was, yeah, it was really special.
It's amazing to hear. I can't even imagine working with such a legend like that. And also, don't discount your effort. Your effort definitely played a big role. So we have to give Kate her props. And also, if you do have any questions, please make sure to keep them flooding in the chat. We want to make sure that Kate is answering the questions that you guys specifically have. So feel free to leave them down below, and we'll do our best to get to them.
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Yes, we do. So, Kate, your first role, if I'm not mistaken, in the US after all of this glorious campaigning and publicity work with Jay-Z, you came to the US and you actually worked in global catalog, which kind of differed immensely from the work that you were doing before. And you landed a role at Rhino.
Yeah.
So that meant artist campaigns for, I mean, legends like you were Madonna, Led Zeppelin, Green Day. That was kind of like the catalog work that you were doing. Coming from kind of the front lines, how did a catalog campaign, working on a catalog campaign, differ from that frontline work? And what was it like shifting into a space where your skill set needed to rely on skills like manufacturing, product development? Did you struggle? What was kind of that transition like?
Yeah, that was definitely it was definitely a change. It was definitely a change. I think so that Jay-Z record was like one of the last projects that I'd worked on as I was like leaving the UK. And in publicity, obviously the record is already finished. Like, you get the finished product, and then it's your job to go and promote it. And then when I started at Rhino, they were kind of like in the process of like rethinking like how the approach to catalog and like the direction that they were going. But there was a lot of physical product, and I think I didn't have that many people kind of like leading me when I very first started. It was sort of a weird in between time, and I remember having to, so I'd had to deal with the manufacturing plant, and I'd be getting these emails like, "Have you shipped the lacquer?" I'm like Googling like, what is a lacquer? It's the manufacturing part of a vinyl, FYI. And just having like no clue what like any of the verbiage, like how many do you make? Like, I just had no clue of like inventory control or manufacturing, like how to do it. But that I'm so like grateful, like that I had that experience. Like, I learned on my feet, and it's still probably my least favorite part of my job. I'm really glad that I understand it. Like, you have to understand it, especially as we're making more and more vinyl now, and that's, remains like a really important part of our, marketing campaigns. But as my time there like went on, like we were given a lot of freedom to like look at the artist catalog. So whether that was like a Green Day, who is a frontline artist, but they have a new album coming, so how are we also like spotlighting the catalog? Or whether it was, Madonna or Notorious B.I.G., like what cool piece can we do for Record Store Day? You look back at like, Japanese exclusive like imports or whatever, like can we repurpose, or do we have anything in the vault that can be used? It was really exciting. But I think, I was thinking as we were, I was reading the questions yesterday, I was thinking about that and like how the mindset, I think then, I mean, maybe it was just me, but was you're creating these reissues, say you do like a 20th anniversary piece, with like some bonus tracks and, whatever. And you were kind of thinking like, how do I sell to, resell this album to existing fans, like have compelling bonus content, unheard pieces of music that, fans hadn't heard before. But I think you were kind of thinking you were talking to the same people, whereas I think now you wouldn't be thinking like that at all, and like largely due to like TikTok and like and short form, like in the discovery process of like catalog, like it's just so like borderless, you know what I mean? Like, we always say like, I mean, I have a kid who's 10. He hears songs, he doesn't know or care whether they're from 2010 or 2025. It's just the song still, he likes it or he doesn't like it. So I think now with catalog campaigns, it's shifted again. Like you're thinking like it's always on, like you're always wanting to like, redirect fans and guide them to, from one song, like, and encourage them to explore the catalog. And, I also like really, I remember that as well with, that a big part of those anniversary campaigns was taking people back to how that it was a nostalgic thing. I specifically remember working on the Alanis Morissette Jagged Little Pill 20th anniversary album, and like just as you see like what the fans were saying, and it's like people are just enjoying being back in that, like, oh my god, I used to like get ready to this song or whatever, and it's a nostalgic thing. But I think it's exciting how things have shifted so much now. And I mean, obviously in COVID, that the skateboarding video with Dreams, that was just like where you started to really see, wow, that song can just like be top 10 global, off the back of a video. Like it's wild and exciting.
It's such a good point. You're right. I can think about since TikTok started, the amount of like old records, like the Connie Francis record that did so extremely well this year. I mean, a song from the 50s, 60s, just having such a revolutionized moment. But it does sound like even though it was, a catalog position, you were kind of still able to weave in like your creative mind and the ability to ideate and like pitch, how do we package something? So I think it's like a really cool blending of worlds. It sounds like it actually came to be.
Yeah, it
So
was
that's
so
really
that job was so much fun. It was so much fun, and it was the team was really good, and like just having that. I mean, like going and looking at like the studio vaults of any like record label is so amazing. It's like the original Madonna press releases, or Fleetwood Mac master tapes or whatever. Like it's just you have that appreciation for like how music is just it's art and it's history and it's so rich. And like, yeah, I've felt like really lucky to have seen that and worked on some of those things.
It's truly amazing. We have a question from the chat from Justin.
Hi, Justin.
So I'd like to answer this one. Justin asked, what obstacles or advantages has the age of social media brought to marketing?
Well, I think that obstacles wise, I think there's a lot more kind of pressure, I guess, on the artist, to have a constant stream of content. We always we just talk about it all the time now, and I'm sure I think for the most part now we're several years in now on short form, so I think like there's just an acceptance of that everybody's kind of like this is just part of it. We have to do it. We have to, and you have to find a way that, you know, it's to use it in a way that feels like natural and authentic to you. But I'm sure that there's like, you know, a thing where people, artists feel like, I just wanted to write songs and put out music. I didn't want to be doing like 30-second videos. But then on the flip side of that, I think that it's just another amazing medium to communicate with your fans, you know, and you can do so much with it. And there's so many different platforms and so many different ways to use them, you know, whether that's like shorts, whether it's reels, whether it's TikTok, or whether it's Spotify canvases, whatever. Like there's so many variations of like how and where you can place like your content and different sides of you. Like maybe some, you know, some pieces live only on TikTok, and that's you can use it to your advantage. And I think now, like, we just like artist to fan, like you just have so many ways to communicate, which I think like ultimately is a good thing. And share music, like it's not just about like, you know, telling people what you had for breakfast. Obviously it's like there's so many ways for you to be able to share what you're doing, and like put out like barometer tests of like how's that, how, you know, what do people think of this, like, you know, it feels like a kind of yeah, just quite a borderless experience, I think, like fan to artist. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think it gives a lot more opportunity to build out the world that like surrounds a record or surrounds an artist. And sure, maybe there are some artists who want to stick to the writing and the producing and the recording, but I agree. I think it's a positive thing. You get to build this world that invites people in and kind of creates the larger brand around one's artistry. So thank you for that answer. That was very, very interesting and enlightening. So after this catalog work that you did, after 5 years, you came back to the front lines. And if we're talking about brands and artists as brands, I mean, Jason Derulo is no exception to that. And you had the great opportunity of working with him. I'm wondering, as a marketer, what does your specific role look like on an artist team, especially an artist like Jason Derulo? I think heavy traveling, touring, hectic promo cycles. What does your role look like, whether overarchingly or day to day on an artist team like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much love for that project, and I worked on Team Derulo for several years, and it was just it was so much fun. He skewed like heavily international, I think like 80% or something ex-US, which meant that like our stake in, you know, our being like the international team, you know, we were like fully integrated when putting together the strategy with the domestic team, you know, and he just Jason, you know, he was a dancer. He had a troupe of dancers with him and like tricksters and stuff. So like the live show, the TV show was pretty compelling, and nobody, there were very few artists at that time that were doing that, you know, that kind of like visual kind of, I mean, there's nobody that doesn't enjoy watching like pop music and dancers, like, come on. So he, as a result, we did so much travel, so much, and we had a large travel party, but we were really tight knit. You know, I think like once you're like bedded in with a team, with an artist team, you know what's important to them, you know what's important to the territory, you know, and you're able to just be much more kind of like preemptive with any like possible problems. So then, as a result, things are smoother. And yeah, it was a really fun time, and it was also just as like the Spotify playlisting was like growing and growing in terms of like how that could really drive a record. So we would be like so surgical, me and the streaming team, like of like knocking down all these playlists and then like watching the song grow. Yeah, so it was a great project. Although the travel definitely. You know, it's a lot of fun, but it's pretty exhausting for everybody. And like, lest we forget, you've got another 25 projects that you're not working, you know, that also need your attention while you're kind of schlepping around Europe or whatever. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned tons on that project.
Wow, that really sounds like a once in a lifetime experience. And the one thing that I keep taking away from reflecting on what you just said, travel, TV shows, touring, radio, like the theme throughout all of it for somebody like you, somebody working on a team like that, I feel like is adaptability. Like you constantly have to be flexible. You have to know the demands that need to be met on that specific day for the specific project that you're working on, especially when the artist has their feet in so many different categories. With that being said, how would you say young professionals can prepare themselves to adapt in a constantly changing environment that requires new needs every day?
Yeah, I think and I just to speak to that, like the like international is kind of a unique department because you have to have like a working knowledge of everything. You're across everything. You're looking after the artist's career outside of the US, everywhere outside of the US. So you have to have a working knowledge of like short form strategy, of streaming strategy. You have to understand A&R because there's going to be collaborations. You have to understand, like TV mixes. You know what I mean? Like you really have to have like
Yeah.
a 360 understanding of everything, all the kind of components of an artist's career. And I think like with that in mind, especially as teams get smaller, like we're all doing more. I think the best thing that you can do is be open to anything and always listening, always like offering a hand to help. Yeah, because it's gonna come up. Like there'll be things that even like we were talking about that manufacturing stuff earlier. I didn't have to do it at Warner. We had a different we had it was handled by a different team, and then coming back to Capital, that's become part of my job again. And I'm like,
Okay.
oh, I'm so glad that I like paid attention and like bothered to learn it. And I think that's the same with everything. Yeah, roll your sleeves up, get in there, and learn.
Yeah, there's always a benefit, even if it's not the specific area you see yourself in,
Yeah.
maybe long term. And that kind of brings me to the chat. We have a question here from Zoe. Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Zoe.
Zoe asked, what advice would you give interns working in roles outside their exact area of interest within the industry? I feel like that's a pretty good segue from what we were just speaking about.
Yeah. I think I think like first of all, just like great to have your foot in the door. That to me that was all about that was like the most important. Like, how do I get in the door? Because once you're in, like you know, being smiley, being helpful, being I mean, just those like basic like personality pieces of like smiling. I think people respond to that. They remember you, and then like make it your business to if you're in the your internship is in the marketing department, but really like your passion is A&R, like make it your business to connect with the A&R, someone in the A&R team, ask for who should I speak to, because everybody loves sharing their story. Like I was very nervous about this live stream. I'm loving it. So nobody's ever going to be cross for being asked, how did they get to where they got to. So yeah, I think just everyone's going to want to hear from you, and I think it's just the getting in the door. That's the first step, and then the rest, like you're going to make it happen.
Yeah, props to you, Zoe. I mean, in the door is such a huge accomplishment already. And I think you're right. I think if you extend the olive branch, you make the effort and indicate to somebody that, hey, I would love to like sit down with you and hear a little bit more about your story, especially in the music world or the entertainment world. I feel people are pretty receptive to that. And one thing I always kind of tell myself is the worst that somebody can say is no. Like take the risk, take the leap, ask for the coffee chat, send the cold email. What's the worst that happens? You don't get a response. Like that's probably the extent of it. So
And by the way,
congrats
no
to
one's
you.
going to say no. And if they do, like, go by. Like, um,
Agreed. Okay, so Kate, you had all of this wonderful experience at Warner, and then ultimately we got you at UMG, where you're working for Capital. Yay! From your perspective, how has international music and the landscape around it changed just in the few years since you've started at Capital?
since I've started at Capital. Well, I mean that the last, so out of my year 4. So yeah, I mean the most obvious piece is like the short form element, like how that is just so integrated into what our department does now, and kind of having to really look at, it's a huge driver, and it's a metric that we look at, and it's really interesting when when you're looking at trends, like does that translate in the Philippines, or like when you're looking at like the different verticals, like the narratives that we're using. I mean, we were talking earlier about like world building, and how does that translate in other, that starts in the US, like how does that translate outside of the US? Like short form's like a really good example. Like some trends just don't work in other markets, and you got to find other creatives and narratives to work with, and vice versa. There'll be stuff where you're like watching the videos, you're like, I cannot understand like what is happening here, but like it's working. And so I think that's been really like one of the biggest changes. And in 20 and I think like we've gone back to IRL and more travel again, which obviously in the middle of all this there was COVID, and I think there were, and then like Zoom was born, and there was a hot second where everyone was like, oh, like we can just do everything on Zoom, and but like we've gone 360 now, and I think that the artist being in market is just is so important, even when, and it's funny, because I think music has become so globalized now. Like songs can start to cook like from anywhere in the world, any region, and then come back into America, or vice versa, and everybody has access to everything, musically, like content, everything. But I think there's still that kind of that the thing that we still try and do is create those like local moments and like fan connection at a local level, whether that's like fan hangs or like pop-ups, or so that there's that kind of like tangible experience. I still think like even as we kind of like motor forward into like an ever evolving like digital like landscape, I think there's still people still want to like stand next to each other and like experience music together, or like be at a Taylor Swift listening event or whatever it is, and like experiencing the music like together as fans. And so yeah, I think that there is that element is still really important.
Yeah, there's like a connection, a human element that kind of needs to
Oh,
be woven
totally.
throughout all of it, right? I mean, so cool.
Yeah.
So you the roster of artists that you've worked on since you've been at UMG. When I look at them, I see people who there's words associated with them, there's brand recognition associated with them. They have such clear identities. Katy Perry, Troye Sivan, Kali Uchis, like these really, really larger than life big names with clear aesthetics and vibes. How do you balance incorporating, the short-term content and the trending TikTok stuff that you just mentioned, while also still making sure that like that artist's authentic kind of world is still woven throughout everything that you do? Like, are there trade-offs? What does that balancing act look like?
I think, I mean, first and foremost, I think like the mission, like with every artist, is, that well, our mission is like to deliver like their vision, like globally, and, so that the campaigns, like hopefully every facet of the campaign feels like really true and on brand to the artist. I think the short form stuff is a little different because it's like, it just is, is UGC. It says it on the tin, like it's user generated content, like, and whatever like way that people are kind of, responding to the music, like they have that freedom to do that. So, but as you're, in terms of like everything else aside from kind of like creator campaigns, yeah, we would go to like extreme lengths to, make sure that everything feels like, whether you're doing a pop-up in Germany or, a fan event with cupcakes in Sydney, like that everything feels on brand, and that it feels that, the same for whether you were a fan in Australia or in the Netherlands. You know what I mean? Like the thematically, it still feels like an Alessi Rose event or whatever. Yeah, and then that's our job.
Amazing. So you would say compromising kind of the identity of the artist, that you really don't get away with that. That's not a route that anybody should want to take. Like the authenticity has to remain at the forefront.
I think so. Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think like any artist that we look after would be disappointed to hear any other answer than that. Actually, yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah, that's really critical.
Amazing. Chat, please, if you have any more questions for Kate, I'd be happy to lead them into the conversation. But we do have one more in the meantime. What are the challenges in dealing with different territory reps when marketing an artist? It's an interesting question.
The different territory reps in terms of the people at the labels?
Yeah, I think that's safe to assume.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think, I mean, it's so interesting, like the way that is a really good question. So, a lot of the work that like our team does is, within the global company. We have like 60 offices around the world, in different countries. And I think, like we were talking about, like that kind of being very clear, you have a language barrier, obviously. So just being very, very, it sounds silly, but like being very, very clear. And having everything written down in a clear way so that there's no room for error. Making sure that you're like monitoring the kind of, the brand directive and like we were talking about the authenticity of the artist. But on the whole, I've always found that all the local product managers, on the whole, we've always had, throughout my career, they've always been amazing and really committed to the artist. You both have the same goal, which is to, develop the artist's career in that market. So you're marching towards, the same kind of beacon. Of course, like there's times when like you gotta play some diplomacy. There's things come up that are unexpected and sometimes unwelcome, and it requires some unpleasant conversations with either the local label or with the artist team. And that's kind of, I think, like where we come in, and we're that kind of like central spoke in that dynamic. But no, all the teams that I've worked with, both here and in my previous jobs, have been fabulous. And it's been a great synergy.
It's so great to hear. I definitely notice music executives continue to emphasize the importance of like people skills. I mean, that's ultimately what so much of this does come down to. Of course, creative and ideation, all of that is critical to the job, but a lot of this is about the way that you interact and communicate. So I think that your point just kind of reemphasizes that at 1,000%.
Yeah. I mean, I think like in any job, almost any job, it's like people
Yes.
have to like you, unless you're like an incredible genius where like people just have to like, that people just have to accept that you're kind of a bit of a challenge. I think overall people, because you know, the work that you're doing is so, we're on all the time, the medium of communication between like text, WhatsApp, Slack, Zoom Messenger, phone calls, like it's relentless, and you're always, there's always someone awake in the world. Like, well, everybody's, there's like a kinetic energy between everybody. So that kind of like being able to have, your relationship, I mean, it's such a cliche, but like your relationships really are everything,
Yeah, that's a really interesting point from an international marketer, because you're right. Like you always have to be on. You have somebody in this corner of the globe, somebody down here. Like if you're working with all of those different reps, the phone, you have to be ready 24/7. Like when something comes, it might be bedtime for you, but it's not really bedtime because it's awake time for them. So that is a very interesting point.
Yeah, I feel
We
like
have one more question.
Oh, no, go.
No, don't. you off. Don't let me cut you off.
Oh, well, no, I was just so like every time I look at the time, I see it in like 7 different like world clocks. But like
I
that
am
also like yes, there's always someone awake, and you know if I wanted to, I could sit on my phone doing emails. Like there'd be round the clock. But I think that also totally different topic, but like that. You and I think like as I've got a bit older, like kind of having some boundaries is also, because you can just get it becomes your whole life, so I think that kind of no, it's 11 p.m. I'm going to turn my phone off now. Like having like you're the only one that can make those boundaries, and I think it's a skill that like everybody is still, myself definitely included, like you're still like learning. Anyway, I digress. Hi chat.
It's a lifelong lesson, learning boundaries. We have another question from Tori in the chat. And Tori asked, I would love to hear Kate's perspective on how the international music marketing scene differs from the US.
Ooh, good question, Tori. Um, Well, I think like where things have really changed, and one of the, a challenge definitely in my job where you're exporting American repertoire is the kind of huge growth in like local music scenes, specifically hip hop. If you look at whether it's Latin America or Germany or the UK, like hip hop is obviously people are rapping about everything that's around them, like it's hyper local. So it's challenging, exporting like US hip hop because, people have their own, markets have their own hip hop. And because that, just, it tends to be, because of the lyricism involved, I think that, yeah, it does make it more difficult in the English language. And then just the kind of like sonics, if you look at like the charts in Asia, like I think we have globally, yeah, the growth of local repertoire has definitely made it more challenging for us in terms of like international music coming in, definitely, because there's just like the growth in local music has been, and local language music has been so explosive. Yeah, so that's definitely been that's something that we kind of work on every day. And yeah.
Yeah, very interesting to hear. Thank you. We have another question from the chat. What are some routines Kate has to make sure she is recharged for the work week? I guess any routines that you employ to make sure you're recharged. Love hearing about self-care and music. I guess maybe our boundaries talk inspired.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Um, I think one thing that's really important to me is, we have a lot of like my calls start like very early in the morning. And I always make sure that I have a little bit of time before that, like to do a little workout. I only work out at home. I'm, nothing too fancy, but just that kind of like time where I listen to music, like I kind of center myself, and then I get going. Because otherwise, that kind of like sitting, you drive to work, you sit in your office chair, it's like you drive home, like you're totally sedentary. So I think that like movement piece, and just like kind of have it taking a beat before, because of the way the time difference is, like I'll wake up like with like 200 emails, and so before I'm like, ugh, just having that kind of like time just to focus for like 25 minutes in the morning, important. I'm a horrible sleeper, so that I'm always trying to like better that area of my life. But those two are really, and like making sure that there's, I'm like balancing other areas of my life, like seeing friends or whatever it is, because you can 100%, you can do this like 24/7, you really can. And yeah, the boundary piece is important.
Great answer. We have a question, another one coming in from a name twin of yours. We have another Kate in the chat. And Kate is wondering for Kate here, when it comes to short form content, what percentage of trends would you say are universal versus more localized? Would you say it's about an even split, or do most trends tend to appeal to a broader universal audience?
Oh God, I don't even want to put a percentage on that. I feel like there's some, that those like verticals which like just, the lip sync, get ready with me, like fit checks type stuff, like always that is, I feel like pretty, those like car talk, that kind of stuff, like for, is pretty universal. I wouldn't even know what to say for the percentage. That is a great question, Kate. I'm going to pontificate that. Yeah, I don't know what the percentage would be.
It's an interesting thing to think about, though.
Yeah.
Kate, I mean, from this conversation, the amount of positions you've held in the music world, the amount of different artists and different campaigns you've worked on, it's immense. It's so impressive. And I know everybody I speak for, the audience and myself, are so honored to even get your perspective and sit down with you. When you look back on the career that you have, is there a project that you are most proud of, or one where you're like, I really nailed that, like one you'll never forget?
I feel like that's like having like a favorite child,
Me
like you
too.
can't I couldn't pick one. But I will say like the I've learned something from every single project. Even, sometimes, I mean, there's always like a takeaway. Sometimes it's like, and I'm not really a huge fan of the music, but the artist team is great, and you want them to, or it's you love the music, but there's like challenges or whatever. Like there's always something to be learned. And oftentimes, honestly, like I always say, like we were talking about like relationships with the local markets. Like nothing will bring you closer to like a local product manager than like really difficult promo trip, where there's just things going wrong left, right, and center. Like you're having to change everything. That you're like trauma bond, with people. So yeah, I don't know that I could say a favorite, but I do feel really lucky to have worked with everyone that I have worked with. Yeah.
It's amazing. It sounds like you learned something from everything. There's positives and negatives and takeaways regardless of the campaign. That's very interesting though, working on a campaign even if maybe you don't love the music. Like, do you think that it's beneficial to work in like a genre that you love, or
Oh,
there's benefits?
definitely. Yeah, because it's all like you're like, how do I reach that fan base,
Yeah.
And again, like to me, like the most like special part of what we do is like when you see it on ground, when you see people responding, you see fans responding to the music, and that you're like, I mean, I can get really romantic about it. It's like you're like a tiny part of like helping like bring that to, like making that moment happen. Yeah.
Amazing. We have a fun question coming in
Ooh.
the chat from DAP198. And DAP asked, if you could launch a campaign anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be and why?
Ooh.
Very interesting
If you could launch any, okay. I think I would actually pick, um, I might pick somewhere. I would pick somewhere probably in Southeast Asia. So,
Okay.
if I have to be specific with a country, let's roll with the Philippines.
Mm,
But I picked that region because I love our team. This isn't like a diss against any of our other teams, but it's a super creative region. Largely in part because they have less artists like traveling through.
mhm.
So the campaigns that they ideate on and create are oftentimes like mostly without a ton of artist participation, so they have to like really get like granular and creative with what they can do on ground. Yeah, that, I mean, particularly in the Philippines, you can, so it's one of the trigger market, so oftentimes like once something starts to cook there, like that will like impact the neighboring countries, and like now you've got like a snowball effect.
Wow.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I think, those are really fun markets, and that region's really powerful. There's tons of growth there. I think it's always very special, like when artists come to market in that region as well.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. Not a lot of tours are routed through the Philippines. So you do granular. I like that word a lot. It's very true. Like you
Thank
really have to build out the world
you.
somewhere like that. I love that's so interesting to hear. We have about 2 minutes left in our stream. And Kate, I'm wondering, with your experience, what are you most excited for in regarding the future of artist marketing and what is to come? What excites you about?
Ooh. Um, Future of artist marketing. I feel like even you know the even with like like I was saying earlier, like the globalization of music, like everything is accessible to everybody now, which is amazing. You can pretty much, you can reach anyone in the world, and they have access to your music, to your content, which is incredible. But like you're also like, we have that inverse piece of trying to create these like very like local moments and like connections on ground. So you have that like sky view, like global piece, and then you have the more like the sort of like microcosmic local moments. And I feel like even what that looks like under the hood like changes in terms of like how the music's coming in and how it's reaching people, like that kind of local connection like will never go away like that. So I'm excited to see how the more macro piece continues to move and develop and flow, but also like within that landscape how we can continue to create like artist to fan moments at a local level that feel special.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking about like the K-pop Demon Hunters. I mean, that song going #1, like on the Billboard Hot 100. Like you're right. It's the opportunity is limitless, and there's so much changing in the business. So it's so awesome to hear your perspective. We have one more question in the chat before we close out, and that question is: What artists with new music coming out should be on the lookout for? What artists with new music coming out should we be on the lookout for in 2025?
Oh, well, I'm going to say someone I'm working really closely with at the moment, who's my girl, Alessi Rose. She's from England. I'm from England, obviously. She's on tour at the moment in Europe. She has her first Capital EP out. And so I'm really excited. She's supporting Tate McRae. She just supported Dua Lipa. I'm really excited for the rest of this year and next year with her. So, Alessi Rose.
Alessi Rose, you heard it here first. Everybody, please, a virtual round of applause for Kate Haffenden. Thank you so much for joining us and carving out the time. I know the chat and I both really appreciate your insight and you taking the time to be here. It means a lot to
Thank you
us.
so much for asking me. Thank you, Blake.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.